Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the podcast where we're moving the conversation forward about the choices you make in your daily life. I'm your host, Monica Cox, and I'm here right alongside of you, learning, growing, observing, and trying to make better choices consciously and subconsciously. Together, we're going to become better versions of ourselves and have raw, honest, open conversations about the things that truly affect our lives. And maybe, just maybe, finally get to a place where everyone else's BS doesn't trigger us. And it was thrust on you, right? So if you didn't have any kind of awareness with yourself and who you are and what you believe, and, really tapping into that intuition and that discernment, I feel like people just got blindsided, right? Like for us, our fertility journeys woke us the fuck up, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like in so many different ways. So being able to get to an insane period of history, of time to live through and have that kind of ability to use your discernment and keep it up, right? Because it went a long time. And there, there was like, am I doing the right thing? Like, oh my God, like, because you just kept getting at so many different angles, like the attack of like, almost kind of like, I even had a friend once say to me, like, my life is hard enough. I don't need that. I'm just making it easy. And I was like, wow. I was like, for me, I'd rather have a harder life and stand for what I believe than just take the easy route right now. And I found that very interesting because in the reality of it, especially where I was in the country, 90% of people wanted it just easy. Let's just go back. And the sad thing was they were all, lied to in a sense of not that I'm against people getting the medical assistance that they choose for themselves. That's not like the conversation. It's the radical responsibility of, did they choose that because they needed it or because of the fear and what they were being told?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was really interesting because I was in Idaho when all of this went down, when, the 2 weeks to stop the spread thing, which I mean, it all seemed strange, Monica. There was something,
Right. Yeah.
there was something in my spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And, prior to my fertility journey, I had a very conflicted relationship with my higher power, and my faith. But I had done the work since then to repair that relationship and to be open, more trusting. I was doing, an hour of meditation a day. Like, this is why I honestly believe without any question that God exists. Because when you look at, when you connect the dots in your life, some of the stuff that comes into your life, you're like, what's happening? But it isn't until after that you can look back and connect the dots and be like, okay, I was invited to come back to a place of spirituality, of connectedness. Meditation came into my life at this time. And it was all interesting preparation.
Yeah.
Because by the time COVID happened, I had been doing work, and I actually went to a week-long meditation retreat in March of 2020 where there was no fear. There was commitment to, and I was in a room with almost 1,000 people, and nobody was sick. Like, I mean, it was just a commit, like nobody was in fear, and just go be in your meditation. And we were meditating for hours in the day. And I honestly believe that there was something in that really sharpened my vision and my awareness. And I woke up in a jarring way. And then once you see this stuff, Monica, you can't unsee it. You see it everywhere.
I know. So- and then you become the conspiracy theorist, right? Like, yay, which is not a good thing or a bad thing, but it is when you realize what the truth is for you, right? And you continuously practice that, right? Like I always say, that kind of journey of the soul, of your spirituality, um it's a consistent practice. You can't just like get there and be like, oh, I'm there, I don't have to do anything else, right? Like it's just like you have to be consistent with the food you want to fuel your body, the movement you want to fuel your body, like they matter, right? And the more that you do that, the more radical responsibility you take inside of you, right? So
Right.
I don't know if you've ever done, Booker, what is it called? A Course in Miracles,
Oh, yeah, I got my copy behind me
right?
somewhere. Yeah, yeah.
And so if you do that daily practice, there's like a 365 practice in it. And no matter, I mean, they obviously use language of God and Jesus and spirit. I don't really think it has to be a religious thing. It could be just a spiritual thing too. Um, but what they get you to do is to really understand that you you create your reality. And even like there's like a judgment one, right? Of like, if you're judging someone else, you're basically judging yourself and like all this stuff. And you're just sitting there like daggers in your heart, like, oh, it's so true. Like, damn it. Right. Cause you just,
Yeah, yeah,
the more you go down this, the more you're like, I can't blame that person because there is no room for that. Because the moment you step back into, wow, that person acted like that way, so that justified my actions, right? It's like, no, that didn't justify shit. You just chose to either get down to their level that you didn't like and sit in that bullshit again, instead of choosing a different path, whatever that may look like, right? Forgiveness,
yeah,
compassion,
yeah,
understanding,
yeah,
whatever. And
yeah.
when you get to that radical responsibility, it's like I believe the matrix is real now, and they're like, here's the red pill, blue pill, you're never gonna look at life again. And you're like, fuck, it is that way. It is that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's a book, one of my mentors, I will be forever grateful, introduced a book to me called The Power of Ted, TED. And I can't remember Emerald. I think the author's name is David Emerald. But if somebody is listening to this and wants to check it out, it's just called The Power of Ted. Essentially talking about the Karpman triangle, where there's victims, persecutors, and rescuers. And that's like the standard level of awareness,
Mm-hmm.
where we're one of the three. We're either a victim, persecutor, or rescuer. And we get caught in this like snake eating its tail of this lack of awareness. But once you realize that you don't have to be in that triangle, that you're actually a creator, you don't have to be a victim, you don't have to be a persecutor, and you do not have to rescue people. You don't have to be any of that. You can get in front of this and be a creator in your life. And it's really interesting because, people make this sound. I mean, people who are not aware, and I don't say that from a place of hubris.
Mm.
I say that as somebody who had a very rough awakening as well. We're like, oh, all this stuff that I thought was real is actually not. And anyone who has achieved any amount of success in their lives, like, for example, so when I was a prosecutor, when I got to the top end of where I was going to be as a prosecutor, I remember thinking, is this all there is? Right? This is it? We all think that when we get to some place that there's going to be a parade, a mariachi band, and streamers like
Yeah.
flying everywhere that like, oh, you made it. And it's like, no, it's not a destination. And so I think that certain, people will come to their moment of awakening in many different ways. For some people, it's a health crisis. For some people, it's going to be, achieving a level of success and then realizing, oh, well, that's it. And then looking around and feeling the emptiness and then going to pursue other things that actually make them happy. Or maybe it was the pandemic or whatever. We all will have a moment where if we're aware enough and want it badly enough, we will wake up.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to wake up, though. That's the other thing, Monica, that I mean, if we're talking about radical responsibility, I think that's another reality, is that for some people, and we saw this, we see this in our own families, we see this amongst our friends, and colleagues and stuff, where they're just committed to the reality that they have. And we don't have to rescue anybody.
Yeah.
I think one of the greatest things that we could do for people that we love, even if we disagree, I mean, like, I've changed my attitude a lot about disagreeing, people being on different sides. I don't care about that. I mean, because you're not going to change anybody, and you have to ask yourself, why do you need to?
Yeah.
Like, why is it my responsibility to try to educate, people who don't want to be educated? It's like my energy is better spent on leading women who want to be different and want something different and perhaps better in their lives. That's where my energy is best spent. That's where the resources are. I don't spend a lot of time trying to convince people to change. I focus on the people that want to change. Because I wanted to change, right? So it's not judgment, it's just discernment.
Yeah.
And so, I think going back to the radical responsibility, like, once we let go of the idea that we have to change anyone and we stop judging ourselves, then we can stop judging everybody else. And then there can be some peace. There can be some equanimity
Hmm.
where, we don't have to be on opposite sides.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What do you think hinders people from making change and taking responsibility for their life? Right?
Fear.
So all these we all have at least one, if not several people in our immediate circles that are just going to choose that for themselves. What do you think, if it's like a soul level, if it's like an evolution level, if it's just fear, like what is your, kind of belief system right now, that because it's just
Fear.
such an age-old question, right? Like, why do
Yeah.
some people do and some people don't? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah. I think it's fear. I remember I went to an event years ago, and I remember one of the speakers said, there's there's nothing, it's not so much the it's there are children that are afraid of the dark. Like, that's, you can educate a child that there's nothing to be afraid of the dark. But there's nothing more complicated than trying to educate an adult not to be afraid of the light. Something like that. I completely butchered that, Monica, but like, you
I
get
get
the
it.
idea.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's just fear. I think it's fear of the unknown, because if we take this full circle back to the idea of radical responsibility, that means not only is anything possible, it means that there's a level of uncertainty and a lack of predictability. Because if you're committed to taking radical responsibility in your life and anything happens, well, then you're like, okay, well, what's my role in this? What do I need to do to address this? Right? Or what's the boundary I need to draw? Or what's the piece of education that I need? Or what's the next step that I have to take? Right? There is a level of uncertainty in that situation, as opposed to being able to lay back and blame everybody. Then you don't have to change. You create certainty in your lack of change.
Yeah.
Right? So you'd have to be willing to be uncomfortable with the unknown. And I think that the only real way to be comfortable in the unknown is to have faith. Whatever that person, like, you could believe in trees and angels and, leprechauns, whatever your shit is, rock on with your bad self. But when you look at the most resilient people and the people that are able to respond in the face of uncertainty, most of the time, they have faith in something.
Hmm.
Right? You don't have to go join a cult or join some religion in order to have faith. Faith starts here. Faith is a conscious decision right now, like right here, right now. And you can choose it at any time. And I think that, going back to something that I said earlier in this conversation with the destruction of the family, and we've moved away from having some semblance. I mean, we all have, like, you know, I've got my opinions on organized religion, but it's neither here nor there, right?
Yeah.
whatever, people get to do their thing. I like to look at it as a relationship. And I think when that relationship has been undermined, then people don't have things that they can believe in. They don't have faith in much,
Yeah.
right? So then they'll look outside of themselves when it's all right here.
Yeah.
And I think
And
that's
the
what causes it.
yeah, I would agree, totally agree with you. I think when you come back to that, destruction of the family, I think it's even bigger than that. I think it's the destruction of the village, right?
Mm.
Where I personally do not believe in let's just say your body's more water than blood, right? Like the old saying for me, blood is thicker than water. I'm like, nah, I like you have more water in your body. And that's just your family that you didn't get to choose, that you were born into, right? Where when you have more of a concept of a village where maybe your bloodline were these 10 people over here, but most of our societies grew up in villages, right? Way before the time we were in these small villages and we worked together as a whole. And some were blood, some weren't, but you all worked together. And the disagreements got taken out onto whatever the battlefields or however villages, dealt with those things. But taking that village away from the core of the community and the family, n- rarely any of us live in true villages, right? We've all left. We're all you even think about the nuclear home, right? Everyone's got a lawnmower, everyone's got 20 dishes, everyone's got a dishwasher, and you're all doing these things by yourself. Where our societies, we were in a village and the women got together and cooked and sing and did the dishes and maybe went out hunting. The men went out hunting, like however the chores were divided, you were still doing it with your community. Where most of us, we do dishes by ourselves and we're all got our individuality, right? And there is no community and it's day in and day out. And that's why it becomes just such a burden because you're just like, oh, I'm doing this by myself yet again. Right. So when I think about that kind of nuclear family, I don't really think, a mom or a dad or even a dad and a dad and a mom and a mom. I'm thinking that wider, like those aunties that used to just show up on your door and like have a chat with you and play with the baby or, like those things, it's so rare to have that. And I think that's why
Mm.
so many people feel so disempowered and in a state of lack is because you are literally doing everything yourself. And I said that to my husband. I was like, we do everything ourselves. We don't live by any family. His family's in New Zealand, my family's in California. Um, we don't have any hired help right now. It's like, just think about it. We do everything ourselves. Like, that's just not normal. That's not normal, right? And our kids do go to school, and that is definitely like some help. But so yeah, I think when people bring up that, like, that's one of the main catalysts of us just feeling so disempowered is it maybe you just don't have time for that empowerment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a reclamation of the time in some ways, right? So
Mm,
if we go down the road of radical responsibility, I think it's there are ways, I think, to cultivate that kind of community that you're talking about. And it sometimes it takes a while,
yeah.
right? Sometimes it takes a while to get your footing with people, vet people, have an opportunity to, give value. Like, one of the things in our own family, we live in Texas now, it is really important is I like to lead with value.
Mm,
What can I do to support these people? What value can I bring to the table if I'm, looking to create a relationship? And, I'm very discerning about how I do that. One, because I want to make sure that I'm in a relationship, with whether it be with other moms or whatever, that there is that sort of reciprocity. Now, it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be equal, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
not keeping score. I'm not interested in keeping score, but finding good community where you have a like-minded community that you can come together and share things and share ideas. Like, I'm excited about what I'm finding here,
Oh,
which is
cool.
pretty cool. Yeah, like I'm pretty excited about what I'm finding. And but I think ultimately that comes from being it before you can have it. And that
Yeah.
takes time. It takes time. And sometimes sending out that energy, Monica, takes a minute to break through. But I have every confidence that when we want community, the community is there, right? It's a
Yeah.
law of polarity. Where there feels like there's a lack of something, there is an abundance of it somewhere. And
Yes.
I think ultimately it's up to us to put that energy out there and attract people into our lives.
Yeah, once again, taking that radical responsibility and, sucking on those sour lemons going, well, you created that. You created that lack of community because maybe you didn't believe it was there, or the default energy that you're running. Okay, maybe you have all this consciousness knowledge of meditation and yoga and all these things, but what's your default energy? Where are you running? And that it's been very interesting to, like, over the last 6 months to kind of go, oh, that's where you've been running. Well, that's why your reality is the way it is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I really appreciate this conversation and I appreciate you inviting me on to, to wrap a taste about this because I think that we aren't the only ones that are kind of finding themselves, looking at these questions. I mean, and ultimately, I mean, if anyone's listening and they might be thinking, okay, these women have presented me with some questions here, these women are getting me thinking. One of the questions I would encourage women to consider or anyone who's listening is the idea of, well, what part of me needed this experience?
Mhm.
What part of me needed to feel isolation, or what part of me needed to feel victimhood, or what part of me needed to feel whatever you might be feeling? And then be like, oh, okay, great. Like, where do I want to go from here now?
Mhm.
Right? Because sometimes we need that either the isolation or feeling the polarity or feeling all this stuff as a way to get refocused on what we actually value. And then
Yeah.
go out into the world and give something, right? Just give. I mean, that's definitely something I learned a lot too over this time is the more I gave, it wasn't so much that the more I received like in kind, but it was the more information that I got, the more discernment that I got, the more personal awareness I got. So I think it's the other part of this is also changing from me to what can I give, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
So
exactly. And I think that's like the radical responsibility of that is, showing up as the person that you would want to show up for you.
100%.
Right? So making that hard decision of like, okay, I'm not going to have the resting bitch face. I'm going to force a smile on my face. I'm going to make eye contact with people, and it's going to feel really uncomfortable. But
I gotta tell you, I have a hard time believing that you have RBF. Like I don't believe that, Monica. I don't believe that. Your
well,
energy is so
well,
like
I'm
high
not just.
frequency that
I'm just.
like
Well, I'm not just talking about myself, but yes. Um, I think it's just those defense mechanisms, right?
yeah,
Maybe, and that's why we banged on a little bit more about COVID is that you saw you were living in a different reality,
100%.
and it was hard for me personally to not get angry about it in the
Mm,
sense of like, uh, you felt more disconnected than ever because you had very limited places to just even have normal discussions.
yeah. Oh, 100%. But I think yeah, I think all of that was an invitation for us to become more discerning and to get more and more clear about what we value. I mean, yeah. I mean,
And
I
like you
think that's going
say,
to be
I
the
think
biggest
it's like a
lesson.
lesson too of pulling yourself out of that, right? Like having
Yeah.
that radical responsibility. Okay, I had this view, I held it. It kind of came, I kind of was really right about it. Uh,
Ah, well,
and now I'm going to sit here and look back and reflect because I have radical responsibility and oh, okay, I was a bitch.
well,
Like it's
yeah,
those lessons learned when you're walking through these things and now you're like, okay, you know, building that reality around myself in a world, like you say, that is different and rebuilding and
yeah,
maybe swinging from these like polarities, like you say, it is celebrated to be a victim,
yeah, yeah,
celebrated to be average. I
yeah.
have another guest coming on who's a friend of mine in here in Hawaii, and we had dinner the other night, and she had me rolling because she woke up that she was selling uh sparkly dust to people, right? And how and how a little bit of this like, wow, I just have to believe it and it will come to me, right? And no, like, well, no, that's part of it, but you still have to take actionable steps, right? Where we do have a bit of society that's like just gone very to a certain point of like, well, I don't have to do anything and I just deserve this. And,
Right.
you know, so
Yeah. Well, that we can go off for another
right. There's a
hour on
lot of
that one. But
topics. Yeah, I hope that you come back on in the future. And
oh, I'd
I'm
love to.
thank you for being honest and open and helping to push these conversations in a healthy way to really just get people to look at themselves, right? That's all it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
So have a great day and we'll see
Yeah,
you
thank you, lady. Yeah,
soon.
I'm jumping off for another meeting, but hey, thank you for having me. I love you.
Yeah.
I think you're
We'll
doing
be in
great work.
touch. Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, let's keep it going.
All right. Bye,
Take
friend.
care. Bye.
Thank you so much again for joining us here on Choices. You can go ahead and leave a 5-star review because we're all friends here. But if you really want to move the conversation forward, please connect with us on our social media accounts, which you can find the links below. Have a beautiful week, and we'll see you next time here on Choices.